Hello and welcome back to the dungeon. Today I'm going to talk to you about casting with resin compared to casting with plaster. Now this is a piece that I cast from plaster using Hirst Art's cemetery mold, and it fell while I was working and most of the headstones broke off. You can see the plaster, though easy to cast, is very brittle and easy to break. So I cast some pieces out of smooth cast 65D, and you can see how much more durable these pieces are compared to the plaster. As I whack them and mash them, and compared to the plaster, which is going to break. So I decided to cast a couple more molds out of the smooth cast and show you guys how I did it. Now this is very simple if done right. And you can get these nice small bits with great detail, and it's not for a lot of work. So what do you need? You're going to need a smooth and level work surface. I use this MDF board, and you're going to need a plastic bag to cover it up with, because the resin tends to stick to stuff. You're going to need some molds. You can make your own, but I use these great Hirst Arts molds. You're going to need some ease release. You're going to need some baby powder, the resin. As I said, I'm using smooth cast 65D. You're going to also need some popsicle sticks to stir and scrape the mold. And you're going to need a couple of plastic cups. Now let's get started. First of all, spread some baby powder over the molds. And once you're done, start tapping the molds up and down on all sides to get the baby powder into all the little crevices. You really want to get it in there, so be a bit rough with it. And then flip it over and tap any excess baby powder out of the mold. You don't want it to ruin your casts by obscuring part of the details. When that is done, take the plastic cups and mark the level to which you want to fill them up with parts A and B of the resin. Now you want to get a ratio of 1:1, so just mark it at the same height on both cups. Just pour part A and then part B to the lines and make sure that you've filled both of them, and make sure that you fill both of them to the same height. Then mix them together and stir them with the popsicle stick. When that is done, start pouring them into the cast. Now if you see that you have bubbles in your mix, do a high cast. It means just pouring it from a high level. That will release most of the bubbles in midair, and you won't get as many bubbles in your cast. I didn't have any, so I felt free to cast a bit low. And once I was done, I just used the clean popsicle stick to scrape the excess resin off and make sure that the resin gets into all of the mold. Now it's important to scrape the excess resin because you don't want to have a thick layer of resin curing on top of your pieces, because they'll be ugly and they won't connect well with other resin pieces. Now this is a picture of what happens when you're doing it wrong. The Hirst Arts instructions said to cover the mold with the resin with a glass pane to push the resin in and make sure that you have a flat surface on top. Now the instructions said to spray the glass pane with a release agent, but the release agent that I used was the wrong kind, and so the resin stuck to the glass. What you should use if you're doing this is a universal releaser, and that should do the trick. In my case, I used easy release instead of universal release, so that cast stuck to the glass and was ruined. And so I moved to using the popsicle stick method, and it seems to work pretty well for me, so I stopped using the glass altogether. If you see any bubbles rising in your resin, spray it with the mold release, and this will release the bubbles that are forming inside. And you can see that the resin is curing, and as it's doing so, it's turning white. So grab a beer, give it 15 minutes, and just watch the magic happen. Now, after roughly 15 minutes, it'll be mostly cured, which means that the cast will be a bit soft, but you can release them out of the mold. Just push them from one side, from the bottom up, and release them. And you see this little filmy excess resin, just can tear it off with your fingers if it's light. If it's a bit harder, just take your X-Acto knife and cut it out. This is especially important when you're taking out the fence pieces out of this mold. You can't tear the resin, the excess resin off. You're going to have to cut it unless you want to tear up the cast that you just made. And that's it. Once you're done removing all of the cast pieces and cleaning them up, you'll be ready to prime them and paint them. And I'll show you how to do that on the next video. I hope this video was helpful for you guys and that you've learned something from it. Please leave your comments and questions below, and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. If you want to support the channel, join us on Patreon and on Facebook. And of course, I want to give a great shout out to all my Patreon supporters, and especially to Maria, our latest addition to the Dungeon Horde. Thank you very much for supporting me and for supporting my work, and I'll see you guys here next week. Goodbye.